Hello there. For today's tasting, I'm taking a look at a Merlot from Slovenia. The winery this is from is Marjan Simcic. This is their Opoka Cru, and this is from the Trobno Cru. It's the 2018 vintage of that, and this is from the Brda region. And Brda is a region whose name translates as hills. It was once part, prior to the change in the boundary at the end of the Second World War, of the Italian wine region Collio, which is in Friuli-Venezia Giulia, and again Collio meaning hills. Maran Simcic is a relatively small family-owned winery run by Marjan and his wife Valeria, and Marjan took over the winery in 2008. He's the fifth generation of his family to be the winemaker here. The winery was founded in 1860 by Jožef Simčič, and they have 18 hectares of vines, of which quite a large proportion actually are in Italy. I mean, there's an open border here, so there's not a huge amount of difficulty moving between the two countries, and so it's practical to be able to manage the vineyards in both areas. But they have quite a diverse set of terroirs, as you can imagine. In a region whose name means hills, there are lots of different exposures of vineyard with different aspects and plenty of different soil types. So this enables the winery to produce quite a large number of wines from different varieties. So they make wines from Ribolla, they make wines from Sauvignon Vert, from Sauvignon Blanc, from Pinot Grigio, and from Chardonnay, and also from Pinot Noir and Merlot. The winery's range of wines is divided into three. So they have an entry-level varietal wine, simply a Brda Classic, a regional varietal wine. Then they have their cru selection wine, which are either from individual crus, or I think a couple of them are actually a blend of more than one cru, but they're more or less vineyard specific. And then the winery's top range are the wines they call the Opoka Cru, and Opoka is a local word referring to a soil type. It's a sort of quite crumbly sandstone, perhaps you'd say mudstone, which is found as part of the topsoil in most of their best vineyards. So this, for instance, is from the Trobno Cru, so it's a single vineyard wine. Many of the wineries' vineyards, this is wine that comes from relatively old vines. The vines in this vineyard are 37 years old, and evidently the clone planted here is the same as is found at Petrus in Pomerol. The vineyard is about 130 metres above sea level. It's got a southeast exposure, and viticulture here is practiced organically and biodynamically, but I believe they're still working towards certification, or certainly they were in 2018. The fruit for this wine is entirely hand-picked. There's some very careful selection goes on to ensure only healthy and fully ripe fruit is used. Ripeness is important here because 30% of the fruit that goes into the fermenting vat goes in as whole bunches, and that's quite unusual with Merlot, because it's unusual that you can get the pedicels, the woody part of the grape bunch, ripe enough for that to work in varieties like Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. So presumably only the ripest have done that. The remaining 70% is crushed, and fermentation takes place in 5,000 litre stainless steel tanks. Fermentation is entirely done with indigenous yeast, so the natural microflora coming into the winery on the fruit, and that's already present in the winery, is what starts the fermentations here. And the skins stay in the vats for something like 28 days prior to pressing. Once pressed, the wine goes into French oak barriques, and about 30% of those are new every year. Then the wine is allowed to age for 4 years in barrel. So that's quite a long period to leave a wine aging in small oak. The wine is bottled unfiltered, and I note that this is bottle 1908. Now I know there were somewhere in the region of 5,066 bottles made, so quite a limited production wine. So let's see what it's like, shall we? Firstly, looking at the colour, we've got a deep, dark wine that is pretty much opaque. I can just about make out a glimmer of the stem as looking through it, but only just. Swirling it, you've got a deep and darkly coloured ruby red wine that, as I swirl it, is clinging quite tenaciously to the glass. You can see the colour in the wine running back down the glass there. It is staining the inside of the glass. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? There's a richness, a ripeness, and quite a classy note to the aromas. There's a ripe, red to black plum fruit, quite a rich note that has hints of chocolatiness. There's quite a lot of concentrated licorice in there, but there are also lifted, almost a touch leafy, elegant red plum top notes to the perfume here. It's all very fresh. There aren't notes of raisins or anything like that. There may be just a hint of cedar, but it's very well integrated with the quite fresh red fruit on the aromas. So let's taste. There's good acidity. The wine has a fine grainy structure with cedary notes, and there's a sort of a dusty grip there that's sort of slightly closing up the front palate. At the same time, there are rich chocolatey notes, and there are notes of dark, slightly raisined fruit under the more fresh sort of red cherry and fresh red plum notes. As you get to the back palate, there you're starting to see more sort of ripe, concentrated licorice notes. There's a slightly bitter grip that's slightly mouth-watering actually, because of just the fine tannins and the acidity are playing against each other quite nicely there. So yes, going from that sort of fresher red fruit in the earlier in the palate to a back palate that is dark red to black plum, and heading on into sort of more concentrated, almost bitter licorice note at the finish. There's a structured note on the finish. The freshness is keeping the finish quite lively. There's quite a polished black fruit there, but it is quite dense, quite impenetrable, and that's where the sort of the bitter licorice notes are coming in again. So there are hints of sort of anise towards the finish there, and I guess the freshness is just bringing out notes of ripe black cherry. Again, throughout the entire of this, there's very clearly a certain amount of cedary tannin in there, but there aren't forward notes of vanilla or cedar. The fruit is very well integrated with the oak there. So the oak is manifesting itself in terms of the structure on the finish. This has a long finish. This has young, fresh fruit. Its structure is quite firm without being astringent. It's a wine whose structure and whose good acidity makes me think that this is, very happily a wine that will age for 10 years and probably a lot longer. I mean, it's got such lovely freshness, and acidity really does give stability to wines as they age. And that, combined with the long structure, I should imagine this is a wine for at least 15 years aging if you want to. And yet at the same time, the freshness of the red fruit does give a certain amount of approachability to the wine, even though there is this sort of slightly dusty, drying grip on the mid to back palate. So yes, actually really quite a sophisticated wine with excellent structure, lovely balance, very well handled oak. I mean, I find it hard to believe this has spent 48 months in oak, because it's really quite toned back. I mean, I know only 30% of it was new, but I would expect the oak notes to be more to the fore in this case. And I think that's a testament to the quality of the fruit. So yes, the wine isn't cheap. Do follow the link I'll put in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage, which will show you where the wine's available and at what price. But undeniably a very well made, high quality wine from the Brda region of Slovenia. So thank you very much for watching our tasting. It's fantastic to have you join us. If you want to watch more regularly, it would be a great idea to subscribe to follow the channel. If you've enjoyed the video, do please press the like button. Do leave any comments you have in the comments box below. If you have any friends you think might be interested, do please share the video with them. But most importantly, do please try and find some time to come and join us for another tasting in the very near future, won't you? Thanks again. Bye for now.